Hey everyone, Brayden here, coming to you with a breaking Disney news update on round 2 of the Nelson Peltz versus Disney proxy war. There is a dissenting large investor in the Walt Disney Company by the name of Nelson Peltz who is trying to push his way onto the Disney board against the will of CEO Bob Iger by campaigning for shareholders to vote in favor of his board nominees at Disney's annual shareholders meeting this spring. This is Peltz's second try at this. As you might know, he attempted to get on the board this time last year. But after Iger promised to implement many of Peltz's campaign initiatives, like restoring the dividend and cutting costs, Peltz dropped out of the race before the voting period began. This past week, Peltz's firm, called Trian Partners, filed their preliminary proxy statement with the SEC, making this reignited proxy war official. This coincided with an appearance on CNBC where Peltz said this time he's for real.
I made a run at them last year. They promised they were going to improve things. I took them at their word. Things got worse. The stock went down. Results got worse. Okay, so no more. I can't continue to give them more opportunity.
So taking a look at who the sides are in all of this, on Disney's side, you have the current board, the board that rubber-stamped Iger's $71 billion acquisition of Fox, let him extend his CEO contract 6 times without ever finding a successor, and this is also the board that greenlights everything you see Disney doing nowadays. So obviously, they are very pro keeping their jobs, keeping the status quo, as is Disney CEO Bob Iger. It also seems many of the activist investors, even though they're called activist investors, it seems like they're mostly good with Iger, with the current board, with the way things are going, and also the giant institutions that own huge portions of the company like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street. They are not expressing any sort of distaste with the management of the company, which seems rather surprising given how far the stock valuation has fallen over the past few years. The stock has not performed well under this existing board, and naturally many investors are saying, hey, you guys need some new board members, you guys need some new oversight, you guys aren't doing the best job, you need some help. So that's where Nelson Peltz and Trian Partners enters the picture here. Nelson Peltz is the single largest active individual beneficiary of shares in the Walt Disney Company. So the Walt Disney Company, Iger, all these guys, they nominated 2 executives that they want shareholders to approve of and add to the board. These are 2 media executives, and in opposition, Peltz has nominated himself and former Disney CFO Jay Rizzullo to take up those 2 board seats. It'll soon be up to investors to choose whether there should be a board shakeup or not. And after Disney's next quarterly earnings report, which is on February 7th, that is when Disney will be releasing the date of the annual meeting, which we'll cover then. Getting into Peltz's new proxy statement and media circuit, Peltz has relaunched RestoreTheMagic.com, his campaign website, which lays out many of the measurable ways in which Disney is underperforming under its current leadership. Peltz took to CNBC the day of the announcement and had a bit of a surprise. The largest active individual shareholder at the Walt Disney Company just got back from Walt Disney World, a Walt Disney World vacation where he was a regular paying guest. He did not use any of the skip the line features or, have some sort of VIP treatment or anything like that. So he was there to take stock of what the place is like for a regular guest and see how it's doing. This was his trip report.
Everybody was nice. I mean, Magic Kingdom and the Hollywood studios were terrific. The people were wonderful. All the employees were smiling, and that's probably in large part because they didn't own any Disney stock. That's the problem here, Jim. This company is just not being run properly. The board oversight is awful. It really is. The park, as I said, certain rides were great, but you can see it's getting a bit long in the tooth. They need more capital invested. They need more capital invested now because the competition is getting keener. You've got Comcast opening 500 acres right down the road in 2 years with a brand new park. This is where all the value today in the stock price resides.
So there's Peltz, one of Disney's largest shareholders, saying, hey, Epic Universe is down the street. Some of the rides at Walt Disney World clearly need some love. It needs more capital now. Disney spokespeople hit back at Peltz with their criticism that they always use against Peltz, which is that he doesn't have ideas. This is what they say. They say, we don't want to add him to the board because Peltz, he doesn't have enough ideas and he doesn't have any media experience. This is Disney's argument for why Peltz should not have a seat on the board. Here was Peltz's response to that frequent attack.
They said I have no media experience. I don't claim to have any. But I would tell you, I don't think they have much media experience. They broke a record this year. You know that the last 5 movies in a row were losers. Now, if that comes with media experience, I want a guy who doesn't have a media experience.
You gotta admit, he has a point there. I find it very interesting that all of the other board members that Disney previously let on the board, also the ones that they're considering adding to the board, all these other possibilities, none of these people had to have a plan on how to fix Disney in order to be allowed onto the board. They were just let right in. They rolled the carpet out for these people. Most of the sitting board members own fractions of the 100th of a single percent in Disney stock. Some of them even less than that. They don't seem to have much skin in the game. And then here you have a guy who holds the most shares of anyone whose name isn't BlackRock or Vanguard. He says, hey, give me a seat. And Disney says, you don't have enough media experience. So you can see why that definitely isn't something that Peltz is too happy about. Here's the thing with the media experience stuff. Look, we saw how Chapek went. Chapek was more of a merchandise guy and a parks guy than he was a media guy, and Chapek got attacked a lot for that, and things did not go super well at the studio while he was in charge. Here's the thing though, and this is coming from someone I know who knows Bob Iger. Iger is all about the Hollywood system. He's about preserving the way that things have been done in Hollywood forever and how they always want things to be done. You have to realize that much of our parks revenue goes into paying for all these sorts of production excesses that really are not necessary at all. It's all about paying off your friends, paying overly inflated prices for basically nothing, just to basically keep the town running. It's about the red carpet. It's about the gift bags. It's about all these things that serve no purpose in giving shareholders a return on investment. Disney sees films as a way to show their values and all this sort of stuff and shape society and this sort of thing. Meanwhile, these other studios, their competitors, they're being run by hardcore, shrewd business sharks that are actually trying to make money. And I know that sounds condescending, but seriously, Disney is focus groups. They know what the audience wants. And Walt said, give the guests everything that you can give them. Give them what they want. But it seems like oftentimes, especially lately, we've seen Disney does the opposite of that. It's all about subverting our expectations, going against the grain. Meanwhile, Universal, they're owned by Comcast. Universal is run by a cable company. The execs at Comcast, they are not Hollywood people. They're not in love with the idea of Hollywood or any of this. They're trying to generate a return on investment. They say, how can we make a Minions movie that doesn't cost us a lot and makes us tons of returns? And that is exactly what they've done over the same period where over at Disney, it's been flop after flop after flop at the studios. We're subsidizing that. Why do you think we're not seeing expansions at the Magic Kingdom or Animal Kingdom or Hollywood studios that desperately need it? We know why that is. It's because all of our revenue at the successful parks is going into subsidizing these losses on the studios, because that is where the heart of these executives are. That is where the heart of Iger is. That's where the heart of many of the board members, that's where they live. So on this idea of should the executives be media focused people like Iger or not, look, putting in a non-Hollywood focused guy, it didn't work with Bob Chapek at Disney. But to Peltz's argument, if you had executives leading Disney who were dispassionate about the studios and could more broadly just look at the business ice cold and say, this is what makes money, this is where we should put our money, they'd have as good of a chance at fixing the studios as a guy like Iger, or perhaps even a better of a chance because they don't have these rose-colored glasses on. So don't take that as a Peltz endorsement necessarily, or me thinking that he's going to save the Disney studios or something like that, but I do find that there is something to that argument that is borne out by the facts that we see at other studios where there's these shrewd businessmen making shrewd business decisions, actually trying to make money at the box office. And honestly, I'm not really sure on the movie side of Disney's business if they're actually even trying to make money, which I know sounds crazy, but nothing about their actions really reflects that that's the case. What the fans want, it seems like Disney just does the exact polar opposite of that. We even see that at the parks too. Was anybody asking for Galaxy's Edge? Really, I mean, most people, I think they imagine Tatooine or Hoth or Endor, or you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? They expected Han, Leia, Luke, you know, perhaps even the newer characters as well. And then what did they end up with? They ended up with a Millennium Falcon ride where there's hardly any Star Wars characters at all. It's where you are the Star Wars character. It's just bizarre stuff like that. You know, going back to the Walt quote, was that really giving the guests what they asked for, what they wanted? Did they run some sort of focus group where people said that they wanted a Star Wars land without any of the iconic characters and without any of the iconic stories and without any of the iconic landmarks? Was that really the case? Probably not. And what are the most popular parts of Galaxy's Edge? It's the lightsaber, it's the Millennium Falcon, it's the things from the film. Obviously, that is the stuff that people respond to, and I think that's what the entire land should have been. So getting back to the Peltz situation, I really don't think that his lack of media experience is really a big knock. And also notably is the fact that Peltz was saying in that clip that he wants to flood the parks with capital expenditure. He's a businessman who can clearly see, he even said this, that the value in Disney stock is mostly the parks segment. That's the money maker, that's the driver for Disney, and if you look at Disney's results, it is obvious. Yet Disney's board, Disney's executives, it's all about the studios at the expense of the parks, at the expense of the future of the parks. So all of this is well and good, but something folks are concerned about with Peltz is there's a lot of talk. He talks a lot about the margins and all this sort of more businessy stuff where there seems to be a lot of focus on the bottom line, squeezing the bottom line, the kind of stuff that Chapek was very good at. Chapek always was looking at that stuff, and that's what he used to start extorting us park guests with Genie Plus, Lightning Lane, cutting back on maintenance, cutting back on cleaning. So there's a possibility that Peltz comes in, he's a board member, and he's saying, you know, we're spending too much at the parks, even though he campaigned on, you know, the opposite and saying we need to put more money into the parks. So I do want to make note, if that's the sort of thing that Peltz is going to be pushing for on the board, turning a nickel into a dime, that's not going to be positive for the guest experience. However, in Peltz's big presentation last year, he's going to be releasing another one of these this year, he highlighted how the guests at the parks are perhaps being overcharged and that Disney needs to slow down with their aggressive pricing strategy on park guests. Combine that sentiment with what he's saying about how he wants to commit all this new capital to Walt Disney World right now, it sounds awesome. It sounds better than anything Iger is actually giving us. You know, Iger might say he wants to give money to Walt Disney World, but has he really been doing anything towards that end? And then there's even the further argument of what is there to lose? You know, some people, for some reason, they confuse this Nelson Peltz guy with those corporate raiders. Here's the thing is Nelson Peltz, we're not talking about a guy buying the company and selling it for scrap. That's not even within the realm of possibility. Peltz doesn't have the capital to buy the company or anything like that. What we're talking about is a voice at the table on the board who doesn't think exactly like all the Iger appointed board members currently do. It's about changing the culture at Disney in a direction that could be positive for shareholders and for guests that have really been feeling the effects of these current leaders for many, many years, and it seems to just be getting worse and worse and worse. If there's even a chance that Peltz joins the board and advocates for our ideas, like increasing park capex at Walt Disney World, decreasing studios' budgets, what on earth do we have to lose? If he's going to campaign for these things, that is exactly the chance that we need. That's the hope that we're looking for. And if his ideas are bad, the rest of the board will just laugh at him and ignore him, right? So needless to say, there's a lot to consider here. I'm not endorsing Peltz just yet. I wouldn't blame you for noticing Peltz and Perlmutter don't exactly look the part of the rebels fighting the Iger empire, but much of what we're seeing here points towards that, in fact, being the case. So if you see what's happening at Disney and say, hey, something needs to give, something's got to change, we got to start heading in a different direction, I certainly feel that way to a large extent. It is definitely worth paying attention to what Peltz has to say here. Lastly, this is a development criminally undercovered by Disney websites and by the mainstream media. Maybe they just missed it, I'm not really sure. It probably also has to do with the fact that this guy, Elon Musk, everyone's sick of hearing about Elon Musk because the mainstream media is constantly going on and on and on about this guy. How many times in the last 2 months have you heard X, formerly known as Twitter? You know, people are just constantly saying that. It's just like crazy. And he tweets a lot and all of that. But here's the thing. If you recall months back, Elon Musk took aim at Iger, who had pulled all of Disney's ads off of Elon's platform. X. And Elon, if you go back in his timeline, he used to actually go to the Magic Kingdom and ride Space Mountain with his kids before every SpaceX launch back in the early days of SpaceX. In recent years, though, he has become a Disney skeptic, saying that their content is bad, that Iger is a bad CEO, things like this. And back when Elon took this public position directly against Iger a couple months ago, I said, wouldn't it be interesting if Elon found out about Peltz's proxy war campaign? So Peltz and Perlmutter, they have this block of shares that they're going to use to vote to try to upset the order of things at Disney. But who knows how BlackRock and State Street and these other guys, how they're going to vote. They're likely going to vote to just keep everything the same and not do any of the stuff that Peltz wants to do. So what if, to increase the chances of making this vote a fair fight, someone with capital, namely Elon, bought up 100 million more voting shares in Disney stock to add to Peltz's 33 million in shares under management? Before really entertaining this whole idea of Elon pitching in with his proxy war or anything like that, my question was, does Elon even know about Peltz's campaign? Because, he's on Twitter and he's misspelling Iger's name in his tweets. Really doesn't seem like he has a whole lot of a clue what's going on at Disney. Well, we found out just the other day that Elon does in fact know about Peltz's campaign. In fact, just a few days ago, Elon went out of his way to go to Peltz's campaign account on X, and it's a tiny account with just a couple hundred followers. This is not something that showed up randomly in Elon's feed or anything like that, and he boosted it. He actually replied to one of the infographics that the campaign had posted, which highlights how the total return for shareholders under all the existing Disney board members has been very, very negative, by saying, quote, "Brutal track record. Shareholders have been incredibly poorly served by the Disney board." So clearly someone close to Elon made him aware of this, the Restore the Magic campaign, and what Peltz is doing with Disney here. How involved is he in all of this? Who knows? It's all speculation right now. But it's my duty as a real reporter to bring you not just the big headlines, but also bring to your attention stuff like this that flies under the radar. And I don't know why it does, because, the fact that the world's richest man, by shareholder value anyways, is watching this Disney proxy war heading into the voting season this spring, that actually seems like pretty big news. Will it really have any bearing on the outcome? Perhaps not, but definitely some interesting stuff for sure. Be sure to subscribe with those notifications on to stay up to date on the latest developments with this proxy war and everything else happening in the world of Disney. We have some big reports on the way, so stay tuned. If you'd like to find out how to support the creation of these videos, head over to mickeyviews.com/support to find out how. And also over there on the mickeyviews.com website, you can find breaking news articles and other news reports between our Mickey Views videos over here, so be sure to check all that out. Thank you so much for watching. From the Mickey Views Magic Studio, this is Brayden. Have a magical day.